The ballroom of the Harrington estate shimmered beneath a galaxy of crystal chandeliers, each prism scattering warm light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. A live string quartet played near the grand staircase, their music blending with the low hum of elite conversation. Senators, venture capitalists, art collectors, media executives, every corner of influence was represented. The annual Harrington Global Health Gala was not merely a charity event, it was a display of power, wealth, and strategic alliances. When Alexander Harrington entered, the room instinctively shifted. Conversations paused. Cameras turned. The self-made tech billionaire carried his presence with the ease of a man accustomed to commanding markets and headlines. His tailored tuxedo fit perfectly, his posture confident yet relaxed. But tonight, it was not Alexander alone who drew attention. At his side walked his wife. Amara's gown was a deep midnight blue, simple in silhouette, flowing softly with each step. There were no dramatic jewels glittering at her throat, only a thin gold chain resting against her collarbone. Her natural curls were swept back into a low bun, revealing a serene face framed by intelligence and quiet composure. She carried herself not with flashy elegance but with grounded certainty. The whispers began almost immediately. "That's her. She doesn't look like I imagined. I heard she grew up in foster care. Strange choice for a billionaire." A pair of socialites near the Champagne Tower exchanged knowing glances. Alexander could have married anyone, one murmured. Models, heiresses, European royalty. And he chose this. The other replied, eyes flicking dismissively toward Amara's understated dress. Alexander heard enough to catch the tone if not the exact words. His jaw tightened briefly, but before irritation could rise, Amara gently squeezed his hand. Her touch was light but steady, grounding him. "It's all right," she whispered, her voice calm. He looked at her. There was no insecurity in her eyes. No embarrassment, only patience. They moved deeper into the ballroom, greeting guests. Some smiled warmly, others offered polite nods edged with curiosity. A few barely concealed their scrutiny. Vanessa Caldwell, a prominent philanthropist known as much for her wealth as her sharp tongue, approached with calculated grace. Her gown shimmered in silver sequins, diamonds flashing at her ears. "Alexander, darling," she chimed, air kissing both his cheeks. "You always host the most spectacular evenings." "Vanessa," he replied evenly. Her gaze slid toward Amara, lingering for a fraction too long. "And you must be my wife," Alexander said, his tone firm. Vanessa's brows lifted ever so slightly. "Of course. How could I forget?" She extended a manicured hand toward Amara. "Vanessa Caldwell, Amara Harrington," she replied warmly, shaking her hand. "And what do you do, Amara?" Vanessa asked, her smile thin and precise. "I work in research," Amara answered. "How lovely," Vanessa said, tilting her head. "It's wonderful to have hobbies." A quiet ripple of laughter passed through the small circle forming around them. Alexander's expression hardened, but Amara remained unshaken. "I find it meaningful," she replied simply. Dinner was announced shortly after. Guests took their seats at round tables draped in white silk, centerpieces of white orchids towering above crystal glassware. The foundation's director stepped onto the stage as the final course was served. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, tapping the microphone, "thank you for supporting our most ambitious initiative yet." A screen illuminated behind him, displaying a sleek presentation, Global AI Diagnostic Network. "Our goal," he continued, "is to deploy AI-powered diagnostic systems in underserved communities worldwide. Early disease detection, maternal health screening, multilingual integration, accessible healthcare at scale." Applause filled the hall. "However," he added, his smile faltering slightly, "we've encountered unexpected complications. Our AI models are showing inconsistencies in diverse demographic datasets, bias issues, linguistic failures in non-English populations. If we cannot resolve this quickly, we may have to delay launch." Concerned murmurs drifted across the tables. At Vanessa's table, she leaned toward Amara again. "Sounds terribly technical," she whispered. "Probably best left to the engineers." Amara listened quietly as the director elaborated on the technical setbacks, referencing neural networks, error rates, and unstable predictive outcomes in minority populations. She set down her fork with deliberate calm. Alexander noticed the subtle shift in her posture, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the focus sharpening behind them. "May I?" she asked him softly. He didn't hesitate. "Always." Amara rose from her seat. The movement alone caused several nearby guests to glance over, curious. She walked toward the stage, her heels clicking gently against marble. The director looked surprised but stepped aside as she approached. If the inconsistency appears primarily in minority demographic sets, she began, her voice steady but not loud, then the training data likely lacks proportional representation. The bias isn't in the algorithm itself, it's in the weighting of the data. The room grew quieter. The director blinked. That's one of our suspicions. You're also experiencing linguistic modeling instability, she continued, because your natural language processing framework was likely trained predominantly on Western syntax structures. When applied to tonal or dialect-rich languages, predictive mapping fractures. Several tech executives in the room straightened in their seats. How do you? The director started. I published a peer-reviewed study 3 years ago addressing precisely this issue, Amara said calmly. Adaptive neural network recalibration through dynamic demographic weighting. We reduced racial diagnostic error rates by 42% in clinical trials. Silence descended like a curtain. Phones began lowering. Conversations stopped entirely. Alexander remained seated, watching her, not with surprise, but with quiet admiration. Amara continued, her tone measured. If you integrate cross-cultural linguistic modeling and retrain the dataset with equitable weighting parameters, you can stabilize both the diagnostic variance and language misclassification. It requires restructuring your back-end architecture, but it's possible. The director stared at her. Forgive me, but, your credentials. She turned slightly toward the audience, meeting their gazes one by one. Dr. Amara Cole Harrington, she said. PhD in computational medicine from MIT. MD from Johns Hopkins University. Dual master's degrees in public health and artificial intelligence. The sound of a fork hitting porcelain echoed sharply from somewhere near the back. Vanessa's expression had drained of color. I currently lead a research team focused on eliminating algorithmic bias in global healthcare systems, Amara added gently. I'd be happy to assist. The director's voice shifted entirely. Dr. Harrington, we would be honored. The applause started hesitantly, then grew, swelling across the ballroom until it became thunderous. But what filled the space more than applause was realization. The woman they had dismissed as poor. The wife they had reduced to appearance. The quiet presence they assumed was ornamental. She had been the most qualified person in the room. Amara stepped down from the stage and returned to her seat beside Alexander. As she sat, he leaned toward her. You could have told them sooner, he murmured softly. She smiled faintly. They didn't ask. Across the ballroom, the tone had shifted entirely. Conversations resumed, but differently now. Respectfully, cautiously, eyes no longer skimmed over her. They studied her, and for the first time that evening, the laughter had disappeared. By morning, the world had caught up to what the ballroom had learned the night before. Clips of the gala flooded every major platform. News anchors replayed the moment drive. Amara Cole Harrington calmly dismantled $1 billion problem in under 3 minutes. Headlines rolled across financial networks and medical journals alike. Tech billionaire's wife revealed as leading AI medical pioneer. Opinion columns praised her brilliance. Social media dissected the uncomfortable silence that had followed her credentials. But inside the Harrington penthouse overlooking Central Park, there was no frenzy. The curtains were half drawn, allowing soft winter light to spill across polished wooden floors. The city buzzed far below, distant and irrelevant. Amara sat near the window with a porcelain cup of tea resting between her palms. She wore a simple cream sweater and loose slacks, her hair falling naturally around her shoulders. No cameras, no applause, just quiet. Alexander stood a few feet away, watching her with a mixture of awe and something deeper, respect that had only grown stronger with time. You've broken the internet, he said lightly, holding up his tablet. Medical boards are quoting you. Venture funds are asking if you'll consult. Even my competitors are suddenly very polite. Amara smiled faintly but didn't turn. It will pass. He walked toward her, placing the tablet aside. You were extraordinary. She glanced at him then. I was prepared. That's not the same thing. Her gaze drifted back toward the skyline. They didn't see me, she said quietly. They saw what they expected. Alexander sat across from her. And does that bother you? She considered the question carefully. It used to. He waited. When I was younger, she continued, professors assumed I was in the wrong lecture hall. At conferences, I was mistaken for administrative staff. When I presented research, some attendees asked who had helped me write it. Her voice remained steady, but the memory carried weight. Alexander's jaw tightened slightly. But brilliance, she said softly, doesn't require permission. Eventually, you learn to let your work speak. By midday, the Harrington Global Health Foundation requested an emergency board meeting. The tone of the invitation was markedly different from previous communications. Formal, respectful, directly addressed to Dr. Amara Cole Harrington. The boardroom that afternoon felt unlike the glittering ballroom of the previous night. This space was sleek, minimal, all glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline. The long black table reflected the faces seated around it, executives, donors, policy advisors. When Amara entered, conversations paused. Not from curiosity, from deference. Several members stood instinctively. Dr. Harrington, the foundation director, greeted her, extending both hands. "Thank you for coming." She shook his hand calmly and took her seat. A large screen displayed data models and highlighted problem areas within the AI diagnostic framework. This time, the director did not explain the issue to her. He asked her, "We'd like your assessment," he said. Amara studied the projections carefully, her expression focused. She requested access to the raw training datasets. Within minutes, she was analyzing demographic weight distributions, linguistic variables, and error clusters. "You're overfitting to dominant population data," she observed. "And your multilingual modules are being layered as add-ons instead of integrated into the core architecture. That's why translation variance is spiking diagnostic errors." The chief technical officer nodded slowly. "We suspected as much. You don't need a patch," Amara continued. "You need a rebuild." Silence settled across the table. "A rebuild would delay launch by months," one donor interjected cautiously. "A flawed launch will cost lives," she replied evenly. No one argued. The director cleared his throat. "Dr. Harrington, would you consider leading this initiative?" As chief scientific director, the weight of the room shifted subtly. Alexander, seated quietly at the far end, did not speak. This was her moment. Amara folded her hands lightly on the table. "I will," she said, "on one condition." Several eyebrows lifted. "This project will not be branded around wealth," she continued. "It will center community partnerships. Local physicians, regional researchers. We do not deliver solutions to communities, we build them with them." A pause. Then, one by one, heads nodded. "Agreed," the director said firmly. Across the room sat Vanessa Caldwell. She had donated millions to the foundation over the years, her presence once commanding attention. Today, she seemed smaller. During a brief recess, she approached Amara privately. "I owe you an apology," Vanessa said, her voice carefully composed. "I made assumptions." Amara regarded her calmly. "Many people do. I shouldn't have," Vanessa added quickly. "No," Amara agreed gently. "You shouldn't have." Vanessa hesitated. "How do you remain so composed?" Amara's lips curved slightly. "Because I know who I am. And I don't require everyone else to know it." The simplicity of the statement lingered long after Vanessa stepped away. Over the next several months, the initiative transformed under Amara's leadership. She assembled a global coalition of data scientists, epidemiologists, and local healthcare providers. Teams in Nairobi, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and rural Mississippi collaborated virtually, sharing real-world insights to refine the AI's accuracy. Instead of imposing a centralized model, Amara implemented adaptive regional datasets. Language modules were no longer superficial translations, they were culturally contextualized systems built by native linguists and medical professionals. Error rates dropped dramatically. Diagnostic response times improved. Maternal health screenings in remote areas identified complications weeks earlier than traditional systems had. The launch event took place in Nairobi, where the first fully operational AI diagnostic center stood. The building was modest but modern, filled with bright light and hopeful energy. Community leaders gathered alongside global press. When Amara stepped to the podium, she did not wear a designer gown. She wore a tailored suit in soft gray, practical and elegant. "Dr. Harrington," a journalist called out, "last year you were relatively unknown outside academic circles. Today you're leading one of the most ambitious global healthcare projects in history. What changed?" Amara paused, looking out at the crowd. "Nothing," she said. The reporter blinked. "I was always a physician. Always a scientist. Always committed to equitable healthcare." She allowed a small smile. "The only difference is that more people are listening now." Applause rose, not explosive, but sincere. Alexander stood in the front row, not as the headline billionaire but as her partner. Pride radiated from him, not because she had proven critics wrong, but because she had remained exactly who she was. After the ceremony, Amara walked through the clinic halls, greeting nurses and local technicians. A young girl waiting with her mother looked up at her curiously. "Are you the doctor who built this?" the girl asked shyly. Amara knelt to meet her eye level. "I helped," she replied. The girl studied her thoughtfully. "You look like my aunt." Amara's smile widened. "Then your aunt must be brilliant." That evening, as the sun dipped below the Nairobi horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Amara and Alexander walked side by side along a quiet street. No whispers followed them, no laughter echoed behind their steps. Only respect. Alexander glanced at her. "Do you regret not correcting them sooner?" She shook her head gently. Respect earned through revelation is fragile. Respect earned through impact lasts. He squeezed her hand. The world had laughed at what it did not understand. But now it understood. She was never defined by their assumptions. She was defined by her mind, her discipline, and her unwavering clarity. And wherever she stood, ballroom or boardroom, clinic or conference hall, she did not need to be announced. Her presence spoke.